Hello. I noticed one of the tweets earlier referred to the fact that a portion of this was done in English, so I'm going to have to apologize in advance. I'm going to do it in English too. And I'm a little embarrassed about that because I actually have Swiss family. As a matter of fact, one of my Swiss family members is sitting here in the front row. He's been bugging me for 15 years to learn Swiss German, so. Anyway, the working title for this was something about House of Cards. I know how popular that is here in Switzerland and all over the world, really. It's quite a phenomenon. So I'm not going to quote President Underwood, so I'll just leave that to the TV. So thank you, Peter. Our company is campaigning, strategy, and communications company. Carpe colloquium is our logo. Seize the conversation, control the conversation. And today I'm going to focus on that in Washington. There we go. So the old model, and there's many models, we certainly don't know all the tricks, was to throw a lot of money at a problem. Go from office to office in our parliament, our Congress, and to buy votes, to buy legislation. Many have tried it. The Swiss banks have tried it, and this isn't to criticize anyone, but I think the recent action by the U.S. Justice Department against UBS, which thought they had gotten beyond that problem, sort of proves that it doesn't work. One of our most powerful lobbying organizations, the National Rifle Association. Maybe you know in the United States, our Constitution guarantees the right to carry guns. The National Rifle Association is the voice for that lobby. And they tried with all their might not to keep President Obama out of office for his second term, and they failed. And of course, General Motors in Detroit, in spite of all their efforts, had problems too. The people who are most successful, not coincidentally, a couple of our clients, and I'll come back to these examples, but net neutrality, an issue about being able to buy a faster internet. There was some of the most powerful organizations on either side. Mozilla, the Firefox web browser company, was on one side, and they were successful by using digital strategies along with traditional lobbying strategies. And then after 9/11, there was a series of campaigns we worked on to promote foreign assistance, and I'll come back and talk about that. But those are two of the examples. And these are some of the tools they use in addition to the others. I think you can recognize them. My colleague spoke very eloquently about digital. I'm impressed. It's kind of a hard act to follow, actually. YouTube, Pinterest, Twitter, Facebook, Snapchat. There's a million of them. And speaking of Snapchat, I hope you'll indulge me here for a second. You're never more humble than when you're around your kids. And they didn't believe that any audience would be interested in me standing before them and talking. So my youngest daughter dared me to take a selfie of myself in front of you. So I'm just going to do that real quick. All of y'all. This is for you, Mia. Thank you. So my goal today, a couple of things. First of all, I just want to come before you with humility. We're not the American know-it-alls. I'm here to learn as much from you as I hope you can learn from me. Give you a little bit of inspiration, of course, some information. Spread the word about this, what we're talking about, and of course, to make a few new friends. Speaking of humility, I was really excited to come here. I heard that the U.S. ambassador, Susie Levine, might be appearing. She worked for Microsoft. This might be her kind of thing. But I understand she couldn't make it. Found out this morning. I think she was stuck in a lift line in Adelboden. So the way we look at strategy in 4 dimensions. The first dimension is one way, sort of the traditional form of communications, pushing your message out, email, websites, so forth. Second dimension, two-way communications, transactional relationships, donors, constituent services. The third dimension is building a community, using social media, crowdsourcing. And then the fourth dimension, which I think is really the most important right now, the wave of the future, is communications and advocacy efforts that sustain themselves through social sharing, content curation, gamification. So when we put together a strategy, we're not all digital. We use many different tools, but we always ask ourselves the same questions, and we usually start this with a workshop. And this is a methodology I actually learned from Peter. So what are your goals? It's very simple. Who do you have to move? What people do you have to move to achieve your goals? Associated with around those people, whether it's the President of the United States, whether it's the CEO of Facebook, are what we call influencers. And those, in many ways, those are the more important. If you want to influence the president of a university, maybe you want to work with his boards of trustees. So you analyze who influences them, and then you try to get to them and move them. And then, of course, messages. One of my least favorite words, but what do you say to motivate people? How do you find what motivates people? My colleague Celinda Lake, who will be speaking to you in a little bit, is an absolute ace at this. Her and her firm, and through public opinion research, focus groups, polling, et cetera, you can really derive a very precise message. And then, of course, what are your tools? What tools are you going to use? So we're going to talk a little. I'm going to talk now a little bit about a couple of case studies from my firm. I mentioned the net neutrality issue. So net neutrality is really the ability to commoditize the internet in my country. The ability for companies like Time Warner and Verizon and so forth to buy a faster internet, and for companies, organizations that don't buy this faster internet, they actually slow it down. By my way of thinking, the internet, like the phone lines, are a public utility, but that's not what the corporations thought. So we were hired by Mozilla to help. This was part of our engagement, and we walked to a strategy to help them think this through in a number of different ways. But the basics of it were for them to gather allies. Google, which was one of the good companies here, and a few others. Facebook, Snapchat. So what Mozilla had was a network. They call it their Hive network. They may have them here. They're like a beehive, and they bring them. They operate. They don't live just for advocacy, but they operate in a number of different ways. They're very active in the badging, the digital badging, and they come together for various things. They're all over the world. So they had a network in place to help them propel their message to people, to all the people. It was very high stakes. This just actually was resolved a couple of weeks ago. President Obama got involved in that. One of their arguments, one of their messages, and I think it's true. I'll help put it together. Is that a lot of social justice issues are hooked to the digital world. For example, why should the African American school in one end of town not have Wi-Fi, but the well-financed school in the nice neighborhood has complete Wi-Fi with computers? Racial justice. So that was one of the issues that went along with it. Some interesting tactics. There's a group, an activist group in the United States that was able to get the private telephone numbers of the Federal Communications Commission, which is the panel that ultimately decides this in our country. It's a federal panel. It's appointed by presidents. So there's Republicans and there's Democrats. But they were able to get private telephone numbers of these 5 people. And over the period of 6 weeks, they flooded their private telephones with 55,000 calls. Just monopolized their switchboard, their phones. So in any case, all that equaled up to successful vote two weeks ago by the FCC to not allow to maintain net neutrality. It was a huge victory for everyone, and I think for our country too. Another example that goes a little bit further back, I mean, it's bipartisan. You see, here's President Bush. I know how popular he was in Switzerland, but he wasn't all bad. Sorry, George. Anyway, after 9/11, there was a crisis in the charitable community, the community that's involved in foreign assistance. The crisis was that, so we've been doing this activity, spent billions and billions of dollars, donated billions of dollars, and it failed. You know, they flew the airplanes into the buildings. It doesn't work. You know, they don't like us anymore. So there was an effort that started at the United Nations called the Millennium Development Goals. You might be familiar with them. They've been around for quite a while. Poverty reduction targets, hard targets for poverty reduction around the world. And they came to us to find a way to develop a campaign around it. And we joined with an organization called Interaction, which was the largest alliance of overseas relief and development groups, all the name brands, Save the Children, Doctors Without Borders, World Vision, etc. And with what was then an organization called DATA, which was a nonprofit that Bono had started debt, AIDS, and trade in Africa. And we started with public opinion research, and we built a whole series of campaigns branded for different nations. In the United States, it was called the One Campaign. In England, it was the Global Call for Action, and another name in Africa. But anyway, Bono was at his peak then of popularity. He had access to the White House. President Bush liked hanging around with him. And one thing he brought along, really smart advocacy, was the faith-based groups. What was so smart about that is that part of President Bush's constituency, a large part, were faith-based organizations. And that was, if you talk about where the shoe pinches, that was where the shoe pinched for President Bush. And through a series of events and so forth, we were able to, in part, it wasn't just us, obviously, but President Bush became the president to increase foreign assistance by the largest since the Marshall Plan to rebuild Europe. It was a huge, huge success. And of course, that translates to what was our key message: healthy mothers and children. But we made a mistake in this campaign, and Peter wanted me to talk about some of our mistakes. One of the things that Bono did was, in his concerts, you may have seen them. You could text your support for this effort during his concert, and your number would come across the screen, sort of like a tweet, like we were doing with tweets earlier. We gathered 1 million cell phone numbers, but we failed to archive them in the right way. We were unable to get the coalition partners to agree on a way to share these assets, and we lost them. 1 million telephone numbers. It was really quite an oversight. And that, I would just say, that sort of emphasizes campaigning. Is a transient activity. Every campaign has a life, but there are assets that you gather with a campaign that live on. There's a sustainability to it, and that's really the most important thing: is to keep these assets you develop in a campaign and use them and keep using them. One of the things we do that doesn't really have anything with an outward-facing campaign is we call it an early warning system, where you monitor and track certain things. You look for opportunities and threats to your client. It helps you be flexible and adaptable. Just one quick example: we've done some work we do some work for law firms. One of the firms in the social justice space, one of the firms we worked for was defending detainees at Guantanamo Bay, that place where they put people away and never let them come out. It's quite a blight on our country, but in any case, there was a case that had come up of a gentleman from the Gulf, a man from the Gulf, leaving aside his guilt or innocence. They had decided to release him, and this was fairly recently, back to his country. And our job, as this sort of behind-the-scenes campaign, was to make sure that our client, the attorney, would be interviewed as soon as the guy was released. It was a big deal for him. So we used Twitter to monitor various reporters around the world that we knew were active on this. There was a reporter in Miami at the Miami Herald. There was a reporter with Reuters in the Gulf. And we were constantly monitoring. My colleague, Violet, who's our monitoring expert. One morning, quite early, I get a notice from Violet that there's been a tweet out of Kuwait from this one reporter. And she made a mistake. It was an open tweet rather than a direct tweet. And it said, so-and-so has been released. So we knew immediately that by monitoring it, that the story was getting ready to break on Reuters. We were able to push him right to our client immediately, and he commented. Two other examples where we use this, and this really is sort of a new aspect of communications. It's more of an internal thing, but we do, sort of by coincidence, we've been drawn into this whole issue of developing counter-extremist narratives to try and prevent recruiting young people from diaspora communities, Birmingham, England, and Columbus, Ohio, and Minneapolis. Minneapolis has the largest Somali diaspora community in the world, 300,000 people. And there was an organization in Europe that was made up of countries and religions that hired us to develop a curriculum to train community-level religious leaders in Asia and Africa to use digital, these sorts of early warning systems, to see flare-ups in their communities, how to address them, how to reach them through the various digital tools. And it's quite interesting, and we've just been drawn into a whole lot of other work around that because of it. We also just put together a racial justice campaign in the United States. I'm sure you read every day. Just the other day back in Missouri, a couple of policemen were shot. It's really a bad time for our country on the racial front. And we put together a campaign, and part of that was this same kind of training. I just want to talk just quickly about tools. I know a lot of you probably know all these tools. Every time I talk about tools, my staff sort of cringes because I never quite get it right. So I'm going to put on my glasses here and just make sure I get it right. So Hashtagify, this is how we might, this is one type of early warning system we would develop. It might involve Hashtagify, which is a free web-based app that allows you to find affinity groups for hashtags. TweetDeck and Hootsuite allows for real-time monitoring of lists and keywords on Twitter and Facebook and hashtags. You can take direct action from the platform. You can respond to a tweet. You can respond to a Facebook post. Another free tool, Social Mention, two free tools, Social Mention and IceRocket. Those are search engines, social media search engines. They also allow you to analyze sentiment data, whether people are talking positively or negatively about things. And then Topsy, which is a Twitter search tool, but it goes all the way back to the beginning of Twitter, so you can search all the way back to it archives all of it. And it also helps you identify searches that are trending. One of the things we're doing and hoping to do more of is to help journalism organizations use these trending technology to identify what stories their audiences want to hear or see or read the next day by what's trending that day in the newspapers. And then, of course, Vocus and Google Alerts. We're not all digital. Matter of fact, we do work with the traditional print media a lot, and part of that is, sometimes your audience, like someone mentioned earlier, your audience doesn't all use digital. Some of them watch late night TV and don't ever touch a computer. So you need to figure out where you reach them. And newspapers, television, traditional media is a good way to do that. Oh, perfect, just ending. So that's basically it. There's my little thank you in Swiss German. And I do want to thank you. I hope I achieved my goals here, and I look forward to talking to you. Thanks.